Okay, I'm trying to just settle in and do a little meditation energy read for the moment. But my dog be barking. It's kind of annoying. It's also possible that the nanny's about to get home with the baby and then the chaos will reign. But until then, I might as well just see what comes up. Yeah, so today's energy weather, pretty intense. Already posted about this a bunch to stories. Not just the astrology with that grand water trine and then Mercury opposing Uranus, like very slightly off of the grand water trine in the fire air signs. Um, but we also have a pretty heavy collective definition right now with Mercury in 34, Venus in 57, and Uranus in 20, defining three different channels for the collective: the 3420, the 5720, and the 3457. So everybody has defined sacral, splenic, and throat right now. And there's this grand water trine with the Mercury in its fall opposed to Uranus in the very, very early degree of Gemini and about to actually transit back into Taurus at the end or at the beginning of next month. Um, so, yeah, lots of energy coming up for people, lots of waking up and choosing violence, as I said in my stories this morning. And then, of course, with Mercury about to go retrograde, we have the added layer of things just being Mercury slowing down, right? Mercury is going to become stationary. It's going to kind of stop and move backwards. Things are going to get off, things are already off kilter. Um, yeah, but what that does for me personally is that Mercury, I'm going through a Mercury phase return because I have Mercury in the at the retrograde station, just turned retrograde at its almost basically at its retrograde station. So furthest from the, or not quite furthest, but at ahead of the sun, and turning retrograde, and that always just kind of unlocks things for me. And these collective transits and then the transits that I'm also experiencing myself are just kind of it's being amplified right now. Um, what So I want to go into some more detail about what I was talking about in my stories this morning, with this grand water trine, the four planets in the late, like the last 5 degrees of the water signs. This is going to be really making our boundaries more porous, especially with Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. It's going to be opening us up to more psychic information. Um, and that psychic information is probably going to be painful. Um, there's also the possibility with Saturn and Neptune this close together that there's going to be some misinformation and disinformation coming through the psychic channels. So it's important to trust your sources if you're taking anybody's channel material as at face value. Make sure that you are, doing your due diligence on that. And if it is your own information, making sure that your channels are clear, and that you are getting, ideally, an objective third party to look at your energy, or just being really, really attuned to your own energy and 100% on top of your hygiene routines and things like that. In times like this, it's really easy to kind of slip out of those habits, and to not be doing those daily practices of clearing and replenishing your energy, and just making sure that there's nothing kind of getting stuck in your space that's the reason why you're getting pissed off. Because a lot of these like entities and thought forms really stick onto those negative emotions. But all of that said, there is a large amount of pain in the collective right now. And from my vantage point here in the United States, this pain is becoming more personal than conceptual. It's kind of like the pain is being involuted, channeled in through the crown and down to the root. And more people are going to be experiencing it at the root level, where it is affecting their survival, affecting their ability to put food on the table, pay the rent, things like that. I've seen a lot of people saying that things are about to get really bad. And I don't, I'm not in the business of forecasting the immediate future, because I don't, there's so many factors that go into the future, and I don't want to be a gloom and doom astrologer or psychic. And so what I prefer to do is to look for ways to work with those currents and to help you navigate them, instead of just saying like, yeah, everything's about to suck for a few years. Because frankly, everything has already kind of sucked for the last 5 years. And more than that, of course, right? For the last 250 to 500 years, things have been kind of shitty. But we have been numb to it because we have been kind of given this experience of convenience and pleasure and comfort to make up for the fact that we are cut off from our ancestors, we're cut off from our source, we're blinded essentially to a large amount of information that should be our birthright. So I'm just going to feel into that. That was a lot that just came through. I'm going to let that land. And if you are not someone who has spent time developing your psychic gifts, I believe that just about everybody has psychic capacity, but that it has just been buried very deeply in the vast majority of us, especially since the years of the Inquisition and kind of that time period, but also before that, the colonization of Europe by the Romans. Ever since those, that wave, and then the wave of the Inquisition, and then of course the quote unquote Enlightenment and this scientific revolution and all of those things, all of these kind of movements and developments in society have acted to dampen and to blind our psychic senses, partly out of necessity and partly out of a desire for control. So the necessity piece is that this phase of our evolution, we were essentially directed to detach from our collective awarenesses and from our abilities to be at one with each other, in order to have unique individual human experiences that we will then be able to go back and share. Because if you don't have that separation, there's no individual experience to have. And so that's the purpose of the essentially the shadow of forgetting, right? I think it's Gene Key 44, or no, it's not. Is it 44? Shoot. No, I'm going to get, I think it is. Forgetting. No, 33. It's 33. Sorry. Yeah. So this has been the phase of evolution that we've been in, is this time of detachment and this time of forgetting our unity and our oneness with each other. And I think that for people who have grown up in this era, we have essentially psychic abilities have been alienated, they have been othered. Not being psychic has been normalized. And again, this was kind of table stakes for the scientific revolution. And I think on the whole, we did get a lot of good things out of it, though we lost some very important things as well. But at a certain point, it's time to come back together, right? And I think we are reaching that point. But the process that has to occur before we can come back together and join each other on the astral plane and be psychically connected while retaining our individuality, and I'll speak more about that later, is that we have to experience all of our accumulated karma and atone for it, right? And this is something that the Gene Keys teaches on a lot. And it is the worldview or the mental model that makes the most sense for me to be able to cope with the horrors of our time. Right? And, I think I talked in some of my previous podcasts about whether beliefs are provably true or whether they're useful. And, starting to select for beliefs that are useful rather than true, because it's better to move forward and to integrate than to get stuck in pain and suffering. So if we adopt this view that this period in human history sucks so badly because we are witnessing and we are directly experiencing and we are sharing and live streaming and knowing all of these things that are going on, these genocides, these horrors, these, traumas people are experiencing on an individual level, on a collective level. All of these, this pain is for a purpose. Not to say that it is okay or right or good, but that it simply already existed within the frequency of the human psyche, and it must be purged in order to be healed from. It must be witnessed in order to be atoned for. And that is one thing that separates this era in history from the last era where we had Uranus and Gemini, which was World War II. And actually World War II was Uranus and Taurus into Uranus and Gemini. And when we look at the parallels, like obviously there are very stark parallels between, the political messaging, the political climate, the scapegoating of the others, essentially the horrors of the Holocaust are being played out again on a wider stage with a larger victim base, a larger scapegoat base, and across multiple nations across the globe, not just in a single empirical power. The difference between now and then, of course, is that we have social media, we have connection, we have live streams, we have videos, we have photos, and we are able to witness this as it happens instead of learning about it after the fact. And that is partially what makes it more painful, because so many more of us are exposed to this pain on a daily basis, but it is also what will make it, what will make us more able to heal from it. Because you can't heal from what you don't face, right? You can't alchemize and transform something if you can't look at it, right? And right now we are given the opportunity with these cycles, with this planetary alignment, with Uranus and Gemini, Uranus having actually is about to move back into Taurus for a few more weeks, for a few more months, and then move back into Gemini for good. Um, we have access to that cycle, those cycles in the past. Um, So I'm just looking at that cycle, that Uranus cycle, and I'm kind of seeing the spirals across time. One thing that I noticed in my research of these cycles and how they line up, Neptune and Pluto are in a resonant orbit, or they have resonance in their orbits. And so Neptune and Pluto's signs are kind of in a cadence with each other, but Uranus does not share that resonance. So if we look back through history, we can find many, many times, and I use the tool on AstroSeek, and so that goes back to 500 BC, and so I can see, or maybe it's, yeah, I think it's 500 BC, and so we can see the eras when Neptune is in Aries, and we can see the eras when Pluto is in Aquarius, and we can see that those eras line up, right? So we get Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius. Like essentially every 500 years it repeats. So at like negative 400 BC, right after AD, in the 60, 70 AD, and then about every 500, 400 and something years from since then. Uranus in Gemini also, of course, repeats every 84 years, and Uranus in Gemini lines up with a few Neptune and Aries. It lined up individually with a Neptune and Aries and a Pluto and Aquarius era, but it has never lined up with those in sync. And the only times that it has happened is in the last few cycles. So it's like Uranus in Gemini is starting to come into synchronization, or it's going to pass through a phase of being synchronized, more likely, because it does not share that resonance. But we're at the very beginning of that, and this is the first time in history when Uranus and Gemini has lined up with Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Aries at the same time. The only time that Uranus and Gemini lined up with Neptune and Aries was the Civil War. So the last time Neptune was in Aquarius, or Neptune was in Aries, and the only time that Uranus and Gemini has lined up with Pluto in Aquarius, actually, scratch that. That has never, yeah, yes, no, it did. Revolutionary War, just for a little bit. But before that, they didn't line up. So we have, if you think of planetary cycles as these loops in time where we have access to the same archetypal frameworks, and we can kind of see the patterns in history and somewhat predict the future based on, like, this is what happened in the past. We are at a point where stories are overlapping in new ways, right? Where we have an opportunity to kind of rewrite or to stitch together new models and new nexuses in these loops, these time loops that build space-time and basically our universe. And so I'm just looking at those loops right now, and I'm kind of watching as the loops are kind of starting to come into synchronization. And yeah, and starting in 2025 and moving forward through 2027, we have this unique nexus of all of these outer planets in Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in this resonant space. So you can think of it as so Neptune and Pluto have been in about a 60-degree angle. Because of the idiosyncrasies of their orbits, Neptune and Pluto have been in a 60-degree angle for a very long time, for almost a century now. And it's like Neptune, because Pluto has a very elliptical orbit, there's a part of its orbit where it's a lot slower, and there's a part of its orbit where it's a lot faster. And we're coming out of that era where it has been in the faster part of its orbit. Like it was inside the orbit of Neptune until, 10 years ago or something, within my lifetime. I don't remember exactly when it was. And then it exited Neptune's orbit, and now it's going out to the place where it's slower. But they're still in resonance, and so it will keep following this pattern. And Neptune and Pluto were together in the 1870s, I believe. And so they're starting their new, like 500? No. Yeah, I think it's about 500. Yeah, like 400 and something year cycle. So we're at the beginning of that cycle, and then in the around 1990, between 89 and 91, we had the other three outers. We had Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn, all aligned in the sign of Capricorn. And so those three outers started new cycles relative to each other in the 1990s. And so now we're at the point where Uranus has come 60 degrees away from Neptune. Neptune is 60 degrees away from Pluto, and we are going to have this this sextile trine aspect between those three outers in effect for the next several years. So that is basically from Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, and Uranus in Gemini. And of course, we also have Saturn on his orbit, who is basically sitting with Neptune and kind of waiting that midpoint of that arrangement. So this is the image I'm seeing is kind of like an image of a wheel that has a bump in it. So as we're going around the year, as planets orbit, as cycles happen, there are going to be these trigger points where we get this consistent like knocking. Like if you have a rock in your tire, you can hear that like thunk, 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 right, as you drive. We're going to have that same sort of effect as other planets move through the solar systems. They're going to come up against that arrangement at several different points in their orbit, as if that were not enough. Of course, we also have Jupiter in Cancer, late Cancer, about to move. And when Jupiter moves into Leo, it's going to oppose Pluto, and it's going to fill out the fourth of those six, like a six-sided star points in the zodiac. It's not quite there yet, but it's at a point where it's dancing around a trine, 120-degree angle relationship with Saturn at that midpoint. And it's not going to be exact until next fall, I think, but it's those two planets are going to be like, so Jupiter's in the mix too, right? Even like just like fucking emphasizing that even more, right? And so at moments like today, which is the end of October, I think it's October 29th, we have Mercury and Mars conjunct each other at the opposition point at the very beginning at the end of Scorpio, beginning of Sagittarius, opposing Uranus, which is it's not the midpoint, but it's the third of those placements. But it's also that late Scorpio is also activating in that grand water trine, which is opening up the floodgates for emotional feeling and psychic connection. And because it's Mars, kind of a slower mover, not the slowest planet, of course, by any means, but also not the speediest, that grand trine is going to be in effect for several weeks, I think. I don't have the dates in front of me, but for a good amount of time. And Mars, or as Mercury, is going to retrograde through that point and come back direct as well as the Sun, getting ready to come through there, and then of course Venus will catch up as well. So all of the inners, right, from the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and I guess we can count Mars as kind of an inner planet too. All of those planets are going to trip that point in the next like month. And then in 2 months after that, then there's going to be another point, right? In early January, late December, early January, right, where we're going to have the Capricorn point is going to get triggered, and like it's going to be opposing Jupiter, and we've got trigger points. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that was a lot of information that I just info dumped. And so I'm just going to take a moment to kind of center into my body and to ground into this moment and to really see like what is the message we need to hear right now in order to be able to move forward through this energy. And that message is that we need to open our hearts to the pain and not turn away. Because when we turn away, we exacerbate it. When we turn away from the pain, we essentially give permission to the one causing the pain to continue to do so. But by turning towards the pain and not flinching and not looking away, we give space to those who are currently experiencing that pain firsthand, and we share it instead of them bearing it alone. And we all know that when you're in pain, having somebody there to witness you and to hold you is the best. Like, it makes the pain so much more bearable to have somebody else say, I see you. I can see that you're in pain. I'm here. Like, even if there's nothing I can do right now to lessen your physical pain, I can lessen your emotional pain by bearing witness. And so that is the work for us right now. And the other thing that's coming through is that many of us have this first reaction to want to jump in to fix it. And this is not to diminish anybody's desire to help make the world a better place, because yes, we all should make the world a better place. But the underlying frequency of your work to help other people needs to be about them and not about you, right? So if you are trying to jump in to fix it to make yourself feel better, that is the wrong response. And you need to sit with and be present with all parts of yourself, including the part that wants to jump in to fix it to make yourself feel better, and the part that just wants to go back to brunch, right? And continue like ignorance is bliss, which it isn't. That's bullshit, by the way. And you need to have a conversation with that part about how it's not your job to fix it and make it go away so that you can get back to whatever it was you were doing before. It's your job to integrate your parts, and then once you are able to come from a place of needing to make other people's suffering, needing to help alleviate other people's suffering because their suffering is your suffering. So regardless of whether or not you're seeing these images live streamed or on your social media or on the news, you know that if people are in pain, people are being oppressed, people are not free, then you are not free. That is the point that you, at which you will automatically go and do whatever it is. And instead of acting from a place of ego, you open yourself up to be an agent of the divine, and you simply do whatever it is that you are called and compelled to do. So it's not, there's no thinking about it, there's no analysis paralysis, there's no decision making. It is simply doing whatever, essentially whatever source, the divine, wants to do through you. But the reality is that so many of us are so far from that place that we still need to sit with that part that just wants to make it go away so that we can go back to feeling better, so that we can go back to brunch. And the best thing we can do is make that part, essentially work with that part and not allow it to be running the show, right? Because that's where white complicity is rampant, right? That's what we see with colonization, with missionary work, with anything where you're going out into the world to essentially force your views on people in order to make them do what you think that they should do in order to live up to your standards of, fit within your framework. And I will admit that I've had some resistance to this idea of like non-doing and non-action, especially in times like this, because it feels like there's a part of me that's like, well, that's just spiritual bypassing, and you need to be out there fighting against, whatever oppression is happening. And what's coming through as a response to that is that it's not your job to fix it and make it go away. And as long as you're trying to just fix it and make it go away so that you don't have to see it, you're being harmful, right? And as long as there is a part within yourself that is still subscribed to this system of capitalist dominance, control, resource extraction, genocide, patriarchy, vertical, dominant hierarchies of dominance, as long as there's a part of you that still subscribes to that model of like, somebody's going to come save me, or I need to go save somebody, that will continue to be perpetuated on the world stage in as large of a degree as it is reflected in all of our inner world. So this goes to that kind of concept of like, oh, we create our reality, so you only perceive what you are. Change your vibration and you'll change your world, you'll change your life, etc., etc. And the reason why that is usually mostly bullshit and spiritual bypassing is because, yes, it's true that reality is a field that is created by consciousness, but it is co-created. It is not created entirely by yourself. And so to tell somebody that their suffering is their own responsibility is bypassing and is gaslighting. Suffering is a natural outcome of humans simply being humans. There was something else that wants to be said about that. I'm just checking in with it to see if that's the time for it. Seems like maybe it's not right now. Okay, so if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for being here with me and for doing the work. And I hope that you are starting to understand and see why I am so adamant about doing the inner work at times like this, especially when these powers that be, quote unquote, these essentially egregores, these homegrown superhuman entities that are currently acting in the role of dominance and control. Because most of the people in, most of the people in the world are still vibrating at a level where they believe that they need that outside authority to dominate and control, if not themselves, then other people. And people haven't grown into a place of being able to trust and co-create. As long as that exists in the outer world, then most of us have inner work to do. And when enough of us have done the inner work, then the outer world will reflect the inner state. These people who are acting as these egregores, using this superhuman power to dominate and control, they will simply dissipate. There will be no more when all of us have healed our inner selves. So that, I think, is what wanted to come through today. So again, thank you so much for being here with me, and I hope that you are surviving this planetary chaos, and go out there and help your neighbors, and yeah, do what we can to survive and to stay together. Yeah, good night and good luck.